week here on the Her Hoop Stats podcast. It is June. It is Monday, June 2nd. I had to catch myself on that one for a second as I was starting out writing my notes and everything this morning, captioning them. I started writing fives on everything, but no, it is the 6th month. It is June 2nd. We're recording here in the morning. It is Jamie Steyer Johnson with Richard Cohen. And Richard, we have a whole host of things we can talk about, will talk about, won't get to everything, but I certainly want to start out with some of the news coming out today and yesterday before we get into the actual gameplay, and that is some signings here being made, some hardship contracts, some rest of season contracts. Most notably, we've got the Connecticut Sun signed Jaylen Brown with waiving Robin Parks. The Fever signed Ari McDonald to a hardship contract. And then yesterday it was reported that the Phoenix Mercury signed Haley Jones to a rest of season contract. So as we know, these contracts are not guaranteed. And so these can still be kind of picked up, dropped. The hardship contract will be contingent on players returning from injury. But for the immediate future, these are destinations for this player. So let's start out with the Sun, because as we were discussing this before we started recording, you made a really good point that I certainly had not seen reported and I had not caught in the release regarding Sun signing Brown and waiving Parks.
Yeah, apparently Robin Parks is Greek and will be heading to Eurobasket later this month. Well, starts in about 2 weeks. So, so that would be part of why Connecticut probably made that decision, in that you don't have to suspend these players. We're probably going to see a lot of players suspended over the next couple of weeks as they leave for Eurobasket. But Connecticut just decided to cut her instead and sign Brown, who I thought looked pretty good for Dallas in preseason. Obviously, they liked her last year as well. So, yeah, he's getting another chance now in Connecticut. Parks hasn't played much.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that for Connecticut, I feel like it's a point where you say, okay, let's try some different stuff out. And especially if you aren't really breaking into the rotation in the situation you're in right now, and then you're going to be gone for a while, you may as well just waive them. And then if Jaylen Brown's able to really make an impact, you have the ability to keep her as opposed to suspending the contract. And then, you have to go through all of the hoops that we know you have to jump through as far as those kind of replacement contracts and stuff work. So I'm really interested to see what that might look like for Jaylen, especially as you said, she was really solid for Dallas last year, came in and provided a little bit of a surprise boost, especially early in the year for them, and then had some decent minutes with Indiana before getting cut. I think that she's definitely someone who has shown the ability to make an impact, and Connecticut, why would you not go for someone that you feel like can make a difference, especially someone with that kind of length. I think that'll be really interesting to see there. There was also a lot of discussion about the directions that Indiana could go. And I know that the presumption was, you're going to go for a point guard, right? Because you've got Caitlin Clark out. And then, just a wild sequence of events that led to both Sid Colson and Sophie Cunningham being out for portions of their last game. And so you've got, not even no guard depth. You've got very nearly no guards in your rotation at that point. So you bring in Ari McDonald, who has experience in the WNBA. And I feel like that is something that is a big priority when you're bringing in those hardship contracts. You're not looking for a project. You're not looking for potential. You're looking for someone that you can slot in and just knows what to expect. And maybe it's not going to be, you're not replacing Caitlin Clark, right? But you're bringing in someone who can handle the ball, someone who can run an offense, someone who can pass the ball. What do you see as Ari McDonald's kind of role and impact being in this time that she'll be with the Fever?
Yeah, I agree with you that when you're trying to bring in someone on a brief contract that you're not expecting to last too long, because Indiana seemed to say that Colson and Cunningham weren't too seriously injured in that game, then you want someone who can step in immediately, play minutes, be effective without having to know every intricacy of your system. And McDonald can do that. We all know she can score. and I'm sure she can run the offense as much as they need her to. They were, I mean, they were literally down to two guards plus playing Duana Barner at the three, which they hadn't really wanted to do most of the season for the end of their last game. So yeah, you can see why they needed to bring somebody in. It's it as I've been trying to explain to people on various social media platforms the last couple of days, when you sign hardship players, you can go over the cap doing it, but signing those players does cut into the cap space because it does count once those players are on the roster. So the only issue with adding players like this is Indiana are presumably hoping to use their remaining cap space to add a 12th player at some point in the season. And having McDonald on the roster will cut into that space, so it pushes that 12th player further into the future. But it's worth it to keep them going for the moment. And it also gives her an audition, because whether for the Fever or for somebody else, maybe you work out that McDonald's the player that you ultimately want in that 12th spot and that you need as sort of an injection of energy and scoring off the bench, because they don't have a lot of guard backup. They didn't even before the injuries started. Colson was the point guard backup, and she's been buried in Vegas the last couple of years. She's not played much. So that was always a little bit of a risk that she was their one primary backup behind Clark.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that if it's okay, Caitlin's out and someone else in a different portion of the rotation gets injured, you can kind of work your way through that. But especially with, the issues that they're having with the point guard situation, you simply can't say, well, we're going to hold off on making a hardship signing to preserve this cap space, because that's gambling on what you're going to do in the meantime. You can't go on a skid, and they really have struggled in these past couple games. And so you're saying, all right, we need to keep this ship sort of steady. We need to do something here to try to give ourselves a little bit more of a chance to stabilize here. So with this emergency hardship exemption, the reporting I saw was that Sid Colson was shooting around after practice the other day. So just can you kind of help clarify for us, like what is the timeline for Ari McDonald? Is it when both Sophie Cunningham and Sid Colson, or two of the three of Sophie Cunningham, Sid Colson, and Caitlin Clark are back, or just the one of them? Would she have to be released?
This should be a pretty simple one. It should be just the basic rules for the emergency hardship, which is when you're under 10 players available. So when any two of those come back,
okay,
yeah, they would have to release McDonald, because then they'd be back to 10. But as long as two of them are out, then they'll still be eligible for the hardship.
Yeah, so I mean, based on the fact that Sophie Cunningham didn't practice most recently, and then if Sid Colson was shooting around, so even if Sid is activated, is able to play even some minutes, you would still be able to keep Ari until you get either Sophie Cunningham or Caitlin Clark back. And man, Sophie really has kind of gone through it here to start the season, has missed time for a couple of different injuries. And so who knows really what the timeline looks like on that. And of course, since this is Monday and there's no games, not sure exactly when we'll start getting some timelines on that. But certainly will be something of a boost. And plus the timing on making the signing means that, again, like I was saying, no games today. And so you have at least an opportunity for a player to not even practice with, but meet their teammates. Because as we were hearing about Haley Jones, like she flew into Phoenix and basically like met some players the night before, met some the day of the game. And so she really will be kind of getting her feet wet on the roll here. But as you mentioned earlier with the Eurobasket, they're going to be losing Seth Uzan, and then you've got I feel like Alyssa Thomas will probably be back sooner rather than later.
Hopefully.
If not, maybe next game. I don't know. To me, looking at the schedule, it felt like a very good opportunity to try to get her a little bit of a break if she had something sort of nagging bothering her before you really get into the thick of the Commissioner's Cup. Because, okay, you lose a tight one to Minnesota. That's a normal regular season game. And then you're getting a rematch with them just a couple days later. as a Commissioner's Cup game, I certainly would be prioritizing the Commissioner's Cup matchup if I'm them, especially just seeing how crazy the landscape is in their conference and saying, hey, maybe we have a chance here to put a little bit of a push on. And then they had to grind one out in between against LA, but they got it done. And so my hope is that it's been mostly precautionary with Alyssa Thomas and we see her back. But I don't know. I'm very interested in what Haley Jones can do, because this is someone who isn't necessarily a prolific outside shooter, is kind of unconventional as far as some of her guard skills go. This is a team that is very much about the efficiency mindset that we thought we might be seeing more from the Dream, but they've kind of have embraced the holistic mentality. And then you've got the Mercury, where I don't know. It seems like a little bit of an odd fit, but maybe they're looking at seeing if she can be more of a consistent distributor for the other pieces they have. What are you seeing as her role there?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Tibbetts has done really well this season is he's sort of highlighted the positive aspects of each player he's got while minimizing their weaknesses, which is obviously what you want to do with any player. But everyone's being put in a position to succeed and do what they can do well. And so, yeah, why not take a shot on a player like that? I think you were being maybe a little generous, saying she's not a prolific outside scorer. Yeah, the flaw with Haley Jones and the reason she's not still in Atlanta being their starting point guard is she hasn't proven she can shoot yet as a professional basketball player. And in modern basketball, it is very hard to stick at the top level if you're a perimeter player and you can't shoot. But we all know she's got good vision, good passing touch. She can distribute a ball. She's got good size, which always makes it easier to fit you into a defense when you're trying to come into a new team, because even if you're not quick, if you maybe don't have great instincts, you take up more space, which always helps defensively, because stick your arms in the air, get in the way is the basic starting point. And so, yeah, I can see them at least making use of her. Whether she ends up being a great fit, we'll have to wait and see. And just to add to what you said, if Natasha Mack gets healthy, then she's Montenegrin to add to the list of players who could be leaving as well. So, yeah, she's obviously been injured, so they haven't had her anyway. So maybe it won't feel like a loss, but that's another player who could be going to Eurobasket.
Dang, that's wild, because I truly was sitting here and about to bring up, all right, the Mercury, their injury situation. You obviously are much better at tracking the Eurobasket, that stuff situation, a little bit closer to home there. But that is huge, because I feel like Natasha Mack is someone that I've just been waiting for them to get back, because she's going to bring another dimension that just isn't there with anyone else. Like, she's a very different kind of player to Kalani Brown, to, really anyone else that they're playing at the 5, because they're in a weird spot for that position right now. But the fact that she very well could be going overseas if healthy is certainly going to be a big impact. And as we talked about with the Ari McDonald signing in Indiana, there definitely is value too if you're bringing in a player mid-season, and especially if you don't know how long they're going to be there. They could be there a while, could not be. Haley Jones has experience. She's been in the league. So certainly really interested to see how all of those movements sort of shake out. I think that there is the potential for certainly other signings as far as injuries go, and potentially trades, especially considering there's very few future impacts for a lot of teams. But we're not going to get into that today. I know that we'll have plenty of opportunity for that, and I'm sure we'll have some here to talk about within the next couple weeks. But in the meantime, let's hit on some of this weekend's play, and let's kind of go back real quick to one of the teams we already mentioned in these signings, which is the Connecticut Sun, because we saw, let's say, the rising and the setting of the sun this weekend, because saw a win. So now every team in the league has a win. And then you saw one of the biggest defeats in WNBA history on the other side of it. So is this, again, we're kind of getting to the point where we don't have to have as much of the disclaimer of it's early in the season, it's early in the season. Like, we're a couple weeks in, we're a percentage of the season underway. And so at this point, there's patterns, right? And so does this tell you more of people should be concerned about Indiana right now? Should people be wary of what the Aces have figured out? Or is this a game to game, things just shift, things just change, and Connecticut's a team that has the ability to put things together, but mostly isn't?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a long season in Connecticut. Then, I mean, they're not incapable of winning games. We saw them; they've put up a fight in a lot of their games so far this season. They got that win, as you said, against Indiana when Mabry was hitting shots, when they managed to keep Kelsey Mitchell quiet. They're capable of it, but then that game against New York was an embarrassment. Basically, that was ugly, and they set a lot of records. I checked before we started recording. We currently have the best 7-game start by point differential in New York, and the worst ever 7-game start by point differential in Connecticut. Even though they've won one of the 7, they that is the most negative anyone's ever been after 7 games in pure point difference. I mean, we all knew it was going to be a tough rebuilding effort because they basically lost their entire core from a team that was good for several years, and now they're starting over. Like you said, with their with the sort of point of bringing in Jaylen Brown and the other teams with their hardships, you cycle through at the end of the roster. You try and bring in players who might help you in future years. It's a building year. You sort of hope Mabry and Charles are your veterans to help carry the youngsters and teach them about the league. And then you try and find players who are going to be part of your future and help them develop. Rivers already looks pretty good for a young player coming in who had a shaky jump shot in college, but has hit some threes, has looked pretty good, both as a distributor and a scorer. But it's still, you're going to have to live with a lot of losses, unfortunately, which is the process in American sports when you're rebuilding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, honestly, I do feel like, okay, if you're going to have a rebuilding situation, to have those young pieces in place certainly helps to make it a little bit easier to swallow. I think, as you said, they really have some great pieces there. I feel like Sinai Rivers is someone who really has so much potential and has the versatility to really bring a lot to a team in the future. And I want to say, my mistake, I said Aces. It was the Liberty that absolutely beat down on the Sun over the weekend. And it looks like the Liberty may have some more of that in their future because they are clicking and they are not even completely healthy. Like, it's been pretty impressive to see what they brought together with the amount of their core that they did return, and then some of the additions they made. I feel like I expected good out of the Liberty, but what they have to this point in the season is, I think, a lot more finesse, a lot more consistency than I maybe would have anticipated, considering some of the hurdles they had, I'll say, last year.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing what you get when you put one of the most talented teams in the league and chemistry as well, because they're bringing most of their core back from last year. You only added sort of 1 or 2 pieces sort of here and there. We got Natasha Cloud, obviously, who's been an even smoother fit than you might have expected her to be. And they lost Thornton, but they prepared well for that sort of expectation by signing lots of other 3-and-D wings. They already had Febick, they already had Gardner. Kennedy Burke is now taking in a bigger role as well. They had replacements already in place to take on that Thornton role, and so they've carried on where they left off. I was the one potential small issue that we sort of started talking about with some people when I was on social media over the weekend was that Brianna Stewart's 3-point shooting has dropped off badly the last couple of years, and Natasha Cloud's outside shooting has always been streaky. To be fair, I mean, she gets hot, she has great games, and then there are others where she can't buy a 3-point basket. So that means 2 of their sort of 5 players in the starting lineup. If you have a team sort of game planning for them in a playoff series, could sag into the paint and start making things more difficult for them. But that's really picking tiny little holes in what is obviously a very talented, very balanced roster.
Yeah, there's certainly like levels that we are evaluating on, right? Where there's over the course of the regular season, there's game to game where they might have an off shooting night and drop one, but they're going to be pretty dang consistent. But then when you do get into those postseason situations against other top teams where they have the time to game plan and they have multiple back-to-back games where they can kind of make those adjustments, that's where you're really going to see, okay, what can they shore up over the course of the year? Can they figure out how to get Stewie into better situations? And because we know that her ability from 3 is significantly higher than we've seen as of late because she's done better in previous years, but it's just kind of whatever's been ailing her over the past season and change has been just pretty impactful to her 3-point shooting. But very interesting to see kind of what direction they can go there, because the trajectory is certainly very good, but we know that they are not satisfied with good, especially I think that they have a massive chip on their shoulder regarding the Commissioner's Cup. I know that they are super motivated to get back there and to hoist that trophy and to get themselves an opportunity there. So really interested to see if they get on a little bit of a tear here during this Commissioner's Cup stretch. But another team here that you and I mentioned a little bit previous to starting to record is the Storm. And this is a team that is kind of hard to get a grasp on, and not so much because of the, as I said, disclaimers anymore of how early it is in the season, but I think more because of we've seen sort of the good and the bad of things, and especially coming off of a long weekend where you have 2 close defeats where you simply cannot close out a game, notably against Atlanta. The Storm have so much potential. They have players that can really put it together, that really work well together. I've been really impressed with the way Gabby Williams has started out the season, finally being over here for ostensibly the whole season, starting out here. But just not getting it done and dropping 2 straight to first the Dream and then to the Aces. And I know that you still have some questions about kind of what their ceiling might be.
Yeah, I'm still not totally convinced. I mean, I've talked before about how the roster looks thin to me, in that I don't know where they're going beyond their top 5, maybe 6 players. I'm still surprised they didn't try to trade Kaylee Lou Samuelson's contract in preseason, although that's still an option later in the year. They look like a team that's going to win plenty of games, but that when they come up against the top teams, and again we're talking about a playoff series here more than sort of making the postseason or winning games over a 44-game regular season, that it is probably going to come up just short again. They look like they're going to go into a postseason with a puncher's chance, and that's never great. You need to get lucky, get hot at the right time for that to work out. Their defense is scary when they're on. They're aggressive, they're quick, they got lots of arms in lots of passing lanes. They're going to turn you over, they're going to create chances the other way. But the consistency offensively and sort of the way of getting everyone involved, I feel like I've barely seen Ezzy Magbegor so far this season. They need to get her more involved in the offense, which will also keep her more involved in your defense. We've seen this over the years in men's and women's basketball. If you keep players involved in your offense, they're going to try harder on defense. It just works for everybody. You feel more a part of the team, more a part of everything that's going on. Then whether Malonga develops and gives them more as well off the bench, once she settles in more, once she sort of learns the WNBA game a little more. She looked great in the fourth quarter last night, giving them a chance to come back against Vegas.
Mhm.
So maybe there's more there, more to come, because yeah, we've got more games to work with now, but it's still, we've been playing 2 and a bit weeks, so yeah, there's still plenty of time to come, but I feel like they may need to make a move, and then the question is whether they think that move is worth it, whether they're close enough to being a genuine title contender to give up a draft pick or or two in order to add somebody for a stretch run.
So the W is a league that historically hasn't had a ton of in-season movement. We've seen it increasing some recently, but it feels like there will be maybe a couple different kinds, which would be maybe some teams that are, as you said, looking to add a piece or two to really be a contender, where maybe they are willing to give up those future draft picks. But otherwise, you could have people that are trading these players within the last year of their contracts, considering that's almost every person outside
Hmm.
of people on rookie scale, unless your last name is Brown, as we've established previously. But that would certainly be something really interesting to see for Seattle. So, kind of looking around the league, I want to hit on this last team because I feel like I talk about them pretty much every episode I'm on, but it's always with different people. And so I like to get the different perspectives. And I just am I'm so fascinated. And I mentioned them earlier, kind of in comparison to the Mercury, and that is the Atlanta Dream. They have a very interesting stretch coming up, I'll say. And that is to mean that they should have a potentially very dominant stretch coming up where they are going up against Connecticut. They have Indiana at home, and then they've got Chicago and Washington. And so these are some of the teams in the league right now that are struggling a little bit. And it seems like Atlanta is putting things together a lot more than I personally anticipated. I know there were some people that had high hopes. There were some people that were really down on it. There's, as usual, most people land kind of in the middle. But for you, what have you seen out of Atlanta? What do you think is kind of their potential here this season based on what we've seen so far?
I mean, I think they always look very like a very interesting team coming into this season. The question was whether it could click or not, because they had the perimeter in place last year. If they could have got healthy, in terms of Canada, Howard and Gray are all top end players. If you can get it to click, and if you can try and get them to be a little more efficient, Ryan Howard's efficiency has always been a little bit of a knock on her, that the numbers are a little lower than you'd like from a player who people want to consider a true superstar, who can be like the number one A1 option on a contending team. But then you bring in Griner and Jones to give them a threat inside, and they always had the chance to be good, but with the chance to implode as well. If Because whether Semesco's sort of system of wanting to shoot threes at every possible opportunity was going to work with those sorts of posts was a question mark, and so far it's working out pretty well. I mean, I think their win on Friday night sort of raises the question of, is Jones and Griner going to be their best pairing inside? Or are they going to end up being best off with one of them and someone like Coffey or Hillman playing
Mm-hmm.
off them? And that's something that it could depend on sort of which matchups they're facing and sort of which opponent it is they're playing against. So, but yeah, I've been impressed, and this is all without Canada and with sort of Pow Pow out of the lineup at times and sort of working out who their third guard is. So they've not even had sort of someone at the controls in the same way that you would expect and want. So if they're healthy, then this is a threat. Then yeah, this is a team looking to take a step forward that may be finding it.
Yeah, especially I think with the way that Nas Hillman has come on lately, since kind of increasing her minutes, and almost forcing her way into the rotation, right? Both with Brittany Griner out for a couple games and then just going in and the spark that she's provided there. I think that certainly contributes to, as you say, the question of maybe you have these lineups where Bree Jones and Brittany Griner are more alternating during portions of the game as opposed to playing alongside each other. And I think that could be really matchup dependent as well, and gives them the ability to change things up where you can always have a dominant big in there, or you can go really big against teams that you feel like you can match up with defensively and probably have some kind of benefit on the interior, some kind of advantage on the interior. But I'm just very intrigued by the versatility there. So as we said, so many games this weekend. Commissioner's Cup getting started, a couple weeks left of that. But was there any player, any teams from the weekend that we haven't gotten to yet that you were like, man, this is really burning to get out, that you've got to make sure that we discuss?
I mean, the Aces probably deserve a mention after bouncing back from that sort of that horrible game that they had last week, and then they had a week of practice to try and see what they could come up with as an answer, and sort of watched. I'm sure Becky Hammond had a few strong words to say about how they played, and they looked pretty good over the weekend. In that, Hammond's deepened her rotation a little bit. We're seeing a bit more of Kitley, a bit more of Nye. They're offering some different looks, and they're going small a little bit more often. Tiffany Mitchell's having to play the 4, which is, I'm sure, not something she's particularly keen on this stage in her career, but yeah, they're getting it done with these lineups, and that again, this is a team that we all know how good they can be when everything clicks. So the question is sort of trying to find your best lineups, find the rhythm to get into those positions, and try and work out where Jewel Lloyd fits, because that one's been a weird start as well, where she's actually been hitting threes but not been hitting anything else. So yeah. We'll wait and see what goes on with that, what happens with that. But yeah, they looked better this weekend than they had previously.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact that you have Chelsea Gray, Jewel Lloyd, and Dana Evans all shooting over 40% from the 3-point line certainly helps a lot. And then you have Aaliyah Nye, who hasn't been shooting quite as strong, but you know that she's a really significant threat. And as you said, they're really working on kind of increasing those bench minutes. And so really interested to see what kind of rhythm she can find as she gets going. Been encouraging to see some solid Liz Kitley minutes just because of how thin the post depth is in Vegas. And like you said, having Tiffany Mitchell at the 4, how sustainable is that? So I don't know. Certainly improvements. Some questions still as far as the Aces go, but they have some players with some of the highest ceilings in the league. And so, that the team as a whole can really accomplish a lot, but it's just about getting those pieces to fit together. So haven't hit every team, but that's not the goal, especially after a full weekend there. So really appreciate you jumping on, giving your perspective, making sure that we know the contract situations, because who else would we ever possibly be able to go to for that kind of expertise? No one better, for sure. But Richard, where can everyone find you until we've got you back on here again?
On Twitter at the address on the screen. If you're watching this on YouTube, at Richard Cohen 1. I'm on Blue Sky. Take the 1 off, and it's just Richard Cohen over there. So yeah, I'm explaining things on multiple social media platforms on a daily basis.
Yes, very frequently, very receptive. So certainly appreciate how open you are to making sure that people get the information they need, getting our articles out there on the Her Hoop Stats platform. Appreciate all the content you've got there. Folks, as always, I am Jamie Steyer Johnson at JSteyz, JSTEYZ, on basically any platform you would be looking for me on. Make sure that you are subscribed to the podcast. Make sure that you are subscribed to our newsletter. Checking out the content that we've got coming out there. As we've said, lots of games, lots going on, so we have lots coming out for you. We will be back tomorrow. Chelsea Lade will be hosting, and we'll be back every day this week going forward. So thank you so much, guys. This is the Her Hoop Stats podcast.